Okay, so I'm back again with all of you, but this time as a moderator, so you won't hear so much from me, but from some of the great guests who are going to be in this panel. And first of all, I'll call Arvils Aseradens, Minister of Economy of Latvia, who will be coming out, the father of the startup law, among other things, here in our country. And then we're getting Kristjan Laanemaa, partner of Karma Ventures, representing the venture capital ecosystem here in the Baltics in Estonia. Martin Villig, who we already heard from, but I mean now we're going to hear the exchanges on Taxify and how the ecosystem is working or not working for it. Egita Poļanska, who is the chairwoman of the board of Starta in LV, this nice initiative here. And so now we can start. The first question that I want to put to our panelists is, I mean, why is this an excellent ecosystem here in the Baltic states to start an enterprise now? Of course, don't be afraid to put in some critical notes if you have them. But I mean, what is the strength of being here? And maybe start with Kristjan from the venture capital investor side.
Okay. I think that one benefit that Baltic countries definitely have is the smallness of the countries. So the startup ecosystem is really close to actually the ones that create the policies in these countries. So there is a direct conversation between the people. I think this is one advantage. And things happen quite quickly here. Maybe this one would be from my side.
And from the Minister of Economy.
Oh, well, it is... there's many aspects of that, and I would start with, I would say, there is, on my view, is a quite huge untapped talent pool. And what I mean by that is, are we lucky or not, but there is very little representation of big corporates, and that means there's a lot of people who are interested to develop something big, but they are not already taken by those big companies, Big Five or whatever, and there is, as I said, in all three Baltic states, that's a great people. That's number one. Second is. It is proximity to Scandinavia that makes Baltic governments are very interested in innovation and development, and that's put in a situation where all three governments are very eager to support startup ecosystems here. I mean, funding, different kind of international activities, etc., etc., and there is, let's say, full green light for startup development here. And I would say, last but not least, is there is actually great costs of development. Baltic states are quite competitive on cost base here, and that's a crucial question actually in startup, actually in beginning phase, how much it will cost, and I would say there are cost benefits are huge, and I would say those are, on my view, three basic aspects here why you should start up in Baltics.
The last advantage is going away slightly, right? So the cost is going up, and there will be cheaper ones, right?
Yeah, true.
And Martin, so from the side of a developer and an enterprise in the transport and digital sphere, how does it look from your perspective?
I mostly agree with the previous speakers. I think it's relatively, open economy where the government is not, stopping or involving so much in let entrepreneurs to do their stuff, and the legislation base is quite okay. Taxes, I would say, is also relatively okay. So I've heard that in some other markets it's more difficult to do business. So ease of doing business, I think, in general is good, and then of course very hard-working talent. And as you can see, the weather, then it's nothing to do outside. People are sitting in the office, coding, building products. So I think that also helps. If you're in Brazil or Portugal or Spain, you probably have a challenge to go out surfing. But here, 9 months at least a year, you work hard. So I think that helps. And overall support of the government, I think the mindset. So we don't have so many good companies, and then they get support, and then that motivates the others to join. So this kind of very close by role models, I think that is. So if you have a very big company, you don't know anyone there, they are maybe not so motivating. If you can meet the founder on the lunch or grab him on the conference, then you actually can talk to them and then really help and motivate the others. So yeah, this small and open society.
Excellent. And Egita, from the point of view of a startup association.
Yeah, and that's actually, I completely agree with others, and it's the small countries, and that's very good thing, because exactly, you can meet everyone, and smaller countries are also more flexible to the change. Also in terms of the startups, also the government, it's, of course, there's a system, but in the small country, it's easier, it's flexible. You can go and meet people, you can talk to them, you can explain things. And other thing, actually, that is for small countries, I think this is the global mindset. Because the startups that are created here, they need to think global, about the global markets, at least the European market already from day one. Because if they want to create a startup here, in even not in the one country, but in the Baltic region, there's no big opportunities here. You have to think global, outside the box, so you have this, I think that's an advantage compared to the bigger countries, because startups who are used to the bigger markets already, like as their home markets, they sometimes don't need to think and be that efficient.
Exactly, and you gave me the perfect transition to my next question. This wasn't rehearsed. We often talk, and I mean, I'm the one doing it, about the digital single market. You said the startups have to think from the very beginning about using the whole European market. I mean, we're the first to realize that it's not so easy always to use this full market. I mean, what is your experience of expanding in Europe? I mean, I guess you're incorporated in Luxembourg, so you already started your company, or with collaboration with your counterparts in other countries. What can we together as part of the Baltic ecosystem, or those, in Brussels and other places in Europe, do it to make it better for Baltic startups and investors, perhaps starting again with Kristjan?
Maybe I'll take this one from the angle of investors. I mean, there have been a lot of initiatives in the Baltic countries set up by each government separately, providing funds to local funds that can invest only locally. I think that, for example, Baltic Innovation Fund was, for that reason, really good initiative where all 3 Baltic states joined themselves together, and they actually provided an opportunity for investors to look pan-Baltic pipeline. Otherwise, all funds were restricted to the local market, and this situation is not optimal because you cannot choose the best deal, but you choose the one that is best locally. So doing it cross-border, it gives much better opportunity to investors. And when investors have this kind of international view, this also transfers to startups. So these investors are much more likely to drive the international business of these startups that they invest in.
And at the political level, what can we do better, or what are the current opportunities or drawbacks?
Well, 1 billion euro worst question. I would say experience, what I see with Latvian startups, a little bit less now about Estonian and Lithuanian startups, but mainly I think the end address is Silicon Valley, and of course we see this market works very well, and that's why government decided to establish, camp here in order to support those who are climbing this hill. Regarding European markets, we are completely fragmented, and I think there's a lot to be done in order to make it as a single digital market. And well, then we can spend a whole panel, and I would say this works. This is a very big side of European digital, single digital. Let's say it's not a single market. That's a very, very fragmented market at the moment.
So we definitely still have work to do, which we're the first to confess. I mean, Martin, what is your experience with Taxify? How many of the European markets are you in now?
To be honest, I don't know. I guess maybe 12 or 13, or haven't counted. So it's last year was quite a fast growth, but overall it's 23. So I think about half is probably in Europe. And I think the market opportunity in Europe is definitely bigger, but again, these markets are also more complicated, so that to understand the specifics and I don't know, even finding the right talent and everyone, the competition is bigger as well, I think, on the talent and everything. And regulatory-wise also, as a small company, I think it's quite a challenge to understand every regulation, whatever. Usually payroll regulation is much more complicated, so that when you hire someone, it's not a perfect match, getting rid of that person. So all of these kind of things, the social benefits are usually more there. So as a small startup, that's definitely a challenge. So entering a bigger market, you need to do much more homework and hire more expensive advisors, lawyers, and all of that. So yeah, it's somewhat imbalanced. Opportunity is bigger, but also you need to prepare much better. So yeah, we see lots of challenges, especially in regulation and that side mainly.
Egita, from the association, what is the experience of the Latvian startups? What are they coming to you with, perhaps with issues that they have with accessing the single market?
About that, actually, I was thinking about it, and I had also a previous panel discussion where it was touched. And in terms of also for the small countries and in general, like Baltics, Nordics, I think, and where this single digital market can come in and help is, I think we kind of need to go beyond the physical location of a country, which kind of limits you. But with the digital, you can bring it, and it kind of helps to help startups and entrepreneurs in general to get easier regulations, to do it unified so the startups can expand. And it also helps the ecosystem. So it's not about one country competing with others, but it's actually one country benefits that the other country is also growing. So is it Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, or Nordics, or Germany, or Poland? It's in the long term, I think the win-win situation is if all those countries are developing. And I think this going digital and easing all the regulations and country-wise restrictions help to do this. It's like in long term we benefit all.
Okay. Yes, please.
Grabbing from Martin's thoughts about making regulation understandable, there's a good idea would be if somebody would package really basic stuff about local regulation for every European market. So startups could grab these tools and understand that, okay, if I go to Germany, I need to deal with these issues about my employees, etc., and about every market, because right now it's a really good market for consultants who can every time sell, their advice, but there is no kind of one source or package where you can, learn that, okay, this is what I need to do.
We just did, for example, stock option analysis for the 23 countries where we are. I think we spent close to 70,000 euros on that, so on the legal fees. So I think we should probably publish it in a blog post and share it to the others, so that if you want to give stock options to all of these countries, in some countries it doesn't make any sense. The taxes are 80% and stock options are useless. It's much easier to pay salary or cash bonus for people, for example. And in the Baltics, in that sense, it's relatively fine. So yeah, all these kind of things to share, and yeah, I think good point. We should share some of our knowledge on that sense as well.
Well, this is a good suggestion, and I mean, there's something going on in that direction. I mentioned the Startup Europe One-Stop Shop, and we're also starting a single gateway, which is on the basic requirements for incorporating and so on. What won't be in either of those initiatives, at least in the short term, are things that are sectoral, like for health, for transport. With this blockchain observatory and forum, we're going to do something, for instance, on ICOs as securities and those kinds of things. So it's still something that needs to be brought together in one place, and so your advice is very, very helpful, and inputs from the audience, from the entrepreneurial community, is always hoped for. One thing that then we can discuss as well, Silicon Valley was mentioned, and I think a lot of our countries, the European Commission with Startup Europe comes to Silicon Valley. We look to have those relations and open up that market to the entrepreneurs, to the startups from our countries, from the EU. But when will we have the first global player, or a more famous global player coming from the Baltic countries and really being very, very strong on the global stage. I mean, we have the certain ones going in that direction, like TransferWise and the payments, who are present everywhere in the US and in Asia. But what is your reading about the global market? Are we going to have one of these champions like a Google or a Facebook from the Baltics? And maybe this time I'll start with the minister.
Yeah, well, every country dreaming about let's say, how we call it, such a phenomenon as you mentioned, and well, I think what we are right now focusing on development of the critical mass of companies which are able to operate in foreign markets, and there we see a lot of great outcomes. Or already Latvian companies investing in America have let's say, there we have maybe simple businesses, I would say, printing of T-shirts, but we have already 2 companies, Printify and Printful, but they're operating from grounds here. Then it's Infogram, which has merged with Prezi, and that's taking part in bigger infographic global company here. And of course, our effort is to create a, let's say, critical mass of such companies. When it will become a unicorn, or as we call it, whatever we call it, but it will take time. Yeah, it will take time.
And so from a venture capitalist from Estonia, I mean, of course, you have the past success of Skype in Estonia, which was a special experience. What do you think the future looks like? Do we have more Skypes in the pipeline, or is this too much to hope for?
I think definitely, and it goes in cycles. I mean, these first success cases produce the next ones. Estonia was, partly lucky to have the Skype experience, but it started the first wave. So many future entrepreneurs came out of that company, saw what can be done and can be achieved, and did it on their own. I mean, the gentleman over there, Martin, is a good example of that. I mean, he was from Skype, and now he's a co-founder of Taxify, which is the next wave again. And we have several of these next wave companies now coming up. And I think that's now when TransferWise, Taxify, Pipedrive, and in Lithuania, for example, Vinted, they exit, they generate quite a large pool of people that will do the next wave and so on. So it's a numbers game. The more people try to make these successful companies, the bigger the chance that one hugely successful will come out of it. So I definitely think that it will happen.
And do we have the capital in the Baltics to support such a rapidly scaling enterprise if we have one?
I think we have more and more. I mean, we have definitely now well covered the early stage. Like we have quite a number of seed funds and now also Series A capability here in the Baltics. Many funds have been launched. In Series B stage, I don't think even it's necessary to have much local capital, because by that time the companies are international anyway and they can raise capital from other markets as well. Maybe we have some gaps in terms of verticals. Many investors are focusing on ICT. There's much less money available for hard sciences like material sciences, health tech, med tech, etc. So something can be done over there, but IT early stage is pretty well covered, I would say.
Excellent. And Martin, what are your global ambitions, and what do you think the chances are for starting from a Baltic Launchpad and going on to be a global platform company or a different kind of digital player?
I just recall that I think it was last summer that we initially were discussing what could be the vision or dream, and then we first time set out that we would like to become maybe the largest European tech company and fighting the big US ones, because all of them basically are from US. If you think of European ones, then I would probably recall Skype or Spotify, and that's roughly it that actually people know. So during that time, Spotify was about 8 times valuation, and we thought that, well, that's possibly doable in some future. Now they have grown about 2 times, so the challenge is a bit bigger, but still, I think the mindset and ambition needs to be there. in order to actually achieve that. But maybe what's the core? I still think that it's to build that kind of company, you need to have what's the good term? Extraordinary founder, basically, to actually take it there. So that had a discussion last night about the personality, skills, or things. What makes these kind of founders different, and they are probably like should be Elon Musk or Steve Jobs type, that they go through the wall, and then maybe sometimes I don't know. It tends to be that these people are maybe not so empathic, but they really have a strong vision and they can pull the company in there. Sometimes they break things on the way, but otherwise, if you're soft, then it's also difficult to get there. Then you would become an average. So I hope that we will have more and more founders like that, and really who push it really, really hard, then it's definitely possible. So dream big.
Well, we're on the superhero stage, so I mean, definitely not me, but maybe some of our Baltic founders here. Some of them are going to be these legendary founders that will be on the global stage. Egita, what is your view, coming again from the Startup Association, from the community of the Latvian startups? How does it look to having a global player from our region, from our country?
I actually agree with Kristjan that it's a numbers game, and we need to boost the ecosystem, and the best way how to do it is attract more and more people that are interested in making a business, trying and do it again, and actually leading by example, telling about it, telling everyone else, inspiring them. And we also have my other hat besides the Startup Association. I work for the Startup Accelerator, Startup Wise Guys, and we had our exit, and this is a good example. We had a exit from our first batch, and this founder who exited the company, now he's actually investing back in our next batches, next founders, and he's also coming in and mentoring. So it's kind of, we need to create more and more those people who are experienced, that they have resources, they can give back, and it's kind of getting the machine going, and it will get bigger and bigger, like turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, a view is, look from governmental perspective, we really have to look on what's a systematic approach, and one of the crucial elements here, in my view, is also our universities. Yeah, and if you look on the Silicon Valley phenomena, behind Silicon Valley phenomena in general, there is Stanford, yeah, and there's no doubt about it. And always a clue, all links always go to Stanford achievements. Second, if you look on Helsinki or Slush or what is done in Finland, that is Aalto University, and that is crucial aspect of development there, and that's a knowledge transfer for the startups, and whereas talent, of course, is crucial, but at the same time, the knowledge, academic, structural knowledge is very important. And I think that is a great challenge for Baltic states to make, how to integrate academia into startup development, yeah? How to make efficient system, how we're transferring knowledge as fast as possible and as efficient as possible to this entrepreneurial finding, and then brings this knowledge in and allows us develop for company to develop as fast as possible.
I mean, one way how to do it. I mean, in the Baltic states, the higher education is quite academic. When matching this with much more entrepreneurial content and entrepreneurial education, this might help as well. Then we have these ICT people and biotech people that's already come out of the university knowing about entrepreneurship and how these great companies are built, and then they can use these tools in order to launch their new company. So maybe this type of entrepreneurial education on top of the science, this would be the winning education in a way.
I would maybe even go a bit earlier, so I think entrepreneurship could be taught already from the first grade, so that starting with some lemonade days, so that when they build lemonade and they actually do a budget, see that how much lemons cost and how much they sold and what was the profit, maybe it was a loss, and then going on from there. So that next steps probably would be that founders actually going to schools in the middle level and sharing their stories, and then the next phase already visiting the companies more and more. And so these kind of already early on relevant examples towards the age group, and then towards the university already then people have a choice and they know that, okay, I want to learn more and more of that. So yeah, it can be very early on, and then student companies in Estonia is actually very good that people are doing in 10th grade, 11th. So they do 1 year, the whole cycle of product development, team management, accounting and all of that, and then it's really practical. My daughter is doing it this year and already see lots of challenges that they were very, very good learning. So that kind of practical things would definitely make entrepreneurs more real, because during Soviet times the parents were not so entrepreneurial, and our age as well. My parents have never done business, so that I have to learn it all myself, so that it's not long-term traditions as in the Nordics or elsewhere. So.
And a shout out to TechChill organizers. They have a kids room up there, I saw, and so that kind of injects the first buck of entrepreneurship if they are in the community like this one.
All the generations, and I saw that Egita wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Martin, and I think it's important to create this new generation of startups and global players, is to give already young kids this opportunity to test out. And I think that for startups, I think the best experience comes when they try, hands-on experience. They try something, they fail, they learn, next time they do better. And usually I think if you come from the regular education system, you kind of start trying it only at the university or a little later, it depends. But if we start doing it at early age, the kids, they already will have more experience, and they will grow up and they will already know something at the younger age, and they can do it better.
Now, if we look at some of the successful startup ecosystems, I mean, either the Silicon Valley or also Israel, I can agree with everyone here that a foundation of that is the good public education. It's the central role of the university. But I would also add that it's often government infrastructure. You had the first email on the ARPANET being sent from UCLA to the aforementioned Stanford, and then the US opening up the internet. And interestingly, both in Silicon Valley and in Israel, the defense budget and the interplay between the universities and the research institutes and defense spending. And this is a chance to say something good about Europe. We're also moving to this European Defense Fund for research, where we very much want to use innovation procurement. And I would very much encourage the Baltic entrepreneurs who, I mean, our defense budgets aren't so huge here that it probably hasn't been the most attractive things for startups. But when this defense budget is coming online, there's going to be very interesting possibilities also in areas like cybersecurity and so on, which we need for our own companies and our own countries here. But these will also be opportunities to get funding, work with other researchers, and develop the type of technological breakthroughs that afterwards, with the universities, with the entrepreneurs who are ready to see how to commercialize them, how we can make the best of these possibilities. Do the organizers allow me to ask for any questions from the audience, or Then I will. Any questions to the audience for any of the panelists? And perhaps signal you're a little bit in the dark for me if somebody wants to ask a question. I don't see anybody.
It's a very Baltic crowd, no one.
People are entranced by the very interesting conversation between us. But there's someone in the back, so please, I call on you. And do you have a microphone? Or someone can perhaps
scream.
Or scream, yeah.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
The minister himself is giving you the microphone. This is
defending all the people who are really keen on Taxify. Would you be able to negotiate with minister in order not to leave the country?
Okay, so the question is about ongoing legislation about Latvian transport.
Indeed.
Okay. So, luckily the minister here is supporting startups and opening up the market, and to the opposite of the transport minister in Latvia, or ministry, that seems to be supporting more of the traditional taxi model. So that, of course, we have been debating these topics several times and meeting all the stakeholders and meeting also the revenue service tomorrow to explain experiences from Latvia, Lithuania, other European markets. And I'm really hopeful that we can find a reasonable solution also in Latvia, and the new law wouldn't be in a way that it's a ride-sharing law, but no drivers actually would do ride-sharing. So yeah, it's I'm still hopeful, but it's difficult. So if you all like Taxify, then you can actually shout out and tell to the politicians that actually you also support opening up the market and flexible ride service what's available. So yeah, I think it's in your hands as much as it is in our hands.
Yeah, I would say. And thank you for the question. And I would like to say is again what was a question about Baltics and a Baltic opportunity. This is the beauty of the small country and small market. The issues which are really hot, quite fast becoming on political agenda, and this Monday this issue was brought on highest coalition level, has been discussed, and we find all necessary checks and balances in this issue, and we will go ahead with quite, on my view, good solutions there, and Taxify will operate here, and I hope Uber will soon open operations here too.
Thank you.
So yeah, I would say that as long as the decisions are made in the interest of consumers and also drivers, then they are good. If the decisions are made on behalf of some small segment of company owners, then that's something that shouldn't happen, and we should tell about that honestly and openly.
Well, this brings up another possible question. I mean, sometimes when we're talking elsewhere in Europe, you get this stereotype that, I mean, all pensioners are against all digital things, and there's a great resistance to change, which, I mean, I think is much less present in our countries. I mean, we're much more ready to try out new things, I think, in the different age groups and so on. That said, as we see with this case, I mean, there are stakeholders because they're perhaps disadvantaged. There are people who might be digitally excluded. I mean, how do you think the situation is with the debate, the collaboration with the different stakeholders? Are we moving forward very rapidly here because we're smaller countries, we can speak more easily, or are there still things that we need to do and to get the whole society on the digital agenda? Maybe starting with the minister and then moving to, or start with our investor.
I mean, you pointed out quite correctly that the discussion here between different stakeholders is much closer because there's less gaps between different society groups. So I guess that everybody who wants to be involved in the discussions can be. It's not very difficult in these small countries. So that's kind of what I think.
Actually, you raise a very complex issue, and it is, globalization is becoming more and more complicated for our societies. And of course, I can speak on behalf of Latvia, and I would say, some things happening. For example, startup law passed the parliament because there were very little understanding of what it is, and that has been sounding very sexy. Second attempt was more complicated, and we stuck on, for example, a debate: should we put in legislation business angels, for example, or such stuff? And I don't know what is a final solution here, but at least first reading we passed there, and now it's the knowledge coming, and people try to act, and so on. So that's one aspect. But other aspect is what I see more and more are people are becoming more and more afraid of technologies, databases, how new technologies like social media affect society, and so on and so on. And I see the growing carefulness and growing resistance towards new change of that, and do that and that. And I will say that for next coming years, that will become more and more complicated. To make, common decision or joint joint decisions or positive yes to change that or do that, and I will see the complexity will grow here on societies, at least in Latvia, if that's the case.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a lot of trust questions as well. So recently we had a debate in Estonia, and I think Estonia is really open society, and people are actually trusting the government. So government has a lot of information about us, and people tend to trust it. So that I think in France or Germany, UK, people are very suspicious and they don't want to share anything. They think that privacy is really, really important. But if in that case, you can't build a digital society as well, because you can't even link the databases or whatever. Even the ID code of person, some countries are totally against it. So in that case, I don't see very good opportunities to build a digital society. But yeah, if you say that, I think young people are quite up to it. They born with the smartphones. Older people, I think many companies can actually educate these people, and government as well. So I think even us, when older drivers come to us, we have to teach them how to use the smartphone, because sometimes they buy first smartphone to drive a Taxify. We show that, okay, that's the phone, you create the Gmail address, then you can download apps and all of that. So it's part of the driver training, and I think banks are doing that, promoting mobile banking and all of these kind of things. So if all the companies, let's say infrastructure or other companies, educate older people, for them, they learn step by step, and for them it's normal. And of course, us as kids, we need to teach our parents and show what are the normal use cases, and they tend to learn. They're a little bit afraid, but if they order the first taxi, then next time they see that, whoa, it works and it's normal. So yeah, everyone can help society in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's that we are not escaping digitalization. It's already here, and it's just the way we need to communicate. And it's both like startups, government, everyone needs to communicate about this, how things are, and be transparent basically about it. So everyone knows there's no misconceptions and there's no threats. We need to kind of address them openly. And it's not going to happen, I guess, in the short term. It's more like a long-term vision, long-term plan that we need to have and work on that and communicate. I think that's the most important thing, to actually not try to do something just for ourselves and under the hood, let's say, but basically to openly talk about the problems and try to discuss them and discuss the fears and possible threats. So the more informed the society are, the better.
Yes. To add.
One topic is also, we as participants in this tech industry have to be also mindful about all the groups in the society. And one area, for example, is asking for more and more support for tech industry. But there's a limit to public support at one point of time as well, because there are other uses for money in our society, and we as a tech industry cannot expect that we get endless amount of tax breaks or support schemes at the same time when there's kind of very little money for education or supporting people that cannot kind of make their ends meet. So I think that considering all this and considering like the economic level or GDP level of the Baltic countries, quite a lot has been made, and we at Karma we think that many good things have been made considering the circumstances. There's a long way to go to be able to support the ecosystem the same way as Finland or Singapore, but the richer we get here, I guess, the more support we see there as well too.
Well, following up a little bit on that conversation, I mean, those of you who are here for my presentation, you saw that the European Commission, along with blockchain, is placing a lot of hope on artificial intelligence as one of the areas where Europe is already strong and as a strong potential growth area. Estonia is already thinking, I mean, at the government level, of having a law on artificial intelligence. I mean, what do you think about this as a potential area for our next high high-level startups? And what do you think of it as an area where a debate with society and maybe society's misgivings are going to cause some difficulties? Perhaps starting with the investor.
I definitely think that this is a really important area to address, and actually one of Karma Ventures' advisors, Jan Tallinn, is working heavily also on this topic. He has opened a public discussion around the potential threats of artificial intelligence, and they are kind of working on topics like how to make sure if machines become more intelligent than people, that they don't kill all of us. Before we get there, there are more like privacy topics and also how the information is used that should be addressed somehow. I think that making it or kind of solving it purely with regulations is quite difficult. So all the tech industry needs to be also mindful about these topics and think about the society as a whole, not just own profits.
I've evidently become a moderator too fascinated by my panel, so I'm being signaled that we should bring to a close. So perhaps very shortly from all the panel members on this, is it a high potential area? Do we have issues with the society?
Well, yes, of course, and it is, how to say, those phenomena become fundamental on the sector development, and on my view, it is, at least I could say in Latvian case, we're heavily lagging behind in understanding what those phenomena mean, artificial mind development or global algorithms or blockchains, and again, I'm back to universities, and I'm very happy, for example, the move what's done by Latvian State University is they created the blockchain accelerator. I hope they have full necessary knowledge for that, but at least they try, and that's very important to bring that on the university scene and discuss how that could be used. But of course, there's a lot to be done in this case in Baltics. Yeah.
Maybe final last words on this.
Yeah, I think it's just those are good areas, but you need to be mindful, and I think there will be loads of learnings in the process.
Okay, so thank you very much to the speakers, and thank you very much for your attention.